Now, how long have you been like fighting this thing from the very, very beginning?
I've been fighting for probably 3 years now, probably.
3 years.
I was sentenced to third offense marijuana, 10 years. I was sentenced to 10 years. The system been let me out. 3 weeks later with my family. Say they just indicted you again. They added a charge, say I was a drug addict.
I think they were trying to use one of my interviews to justify that over something that you were talking about from.
Welcome to the Gossip Channel. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We're growing with you and because of you. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Once we hit that milestone, a special prize will be waiting for you. Stay tuned. And now, let's get into the topic. Even after copping a plea, Boosie just got slammed with a firearm sentence. And this time it feels like the walls are closing in. But here's the kicker. The sentence ain't even the wildest part. Boosie swears the system set him up, claiming he's being framed. Whispers on the block say it all ties back to the moment he beat that death row case years ago. And ever since, it's been target practice on his name. The streets are rattled, the hood's in shock, and hip-hop might have just lost one of its rawest voices. Torrance Ivy Hatch Jr., the man we all know as Boosie Badazz, just took a plea that could force him to say goodbye to the game forever. But let's keep it real. To understand how we landed here, you gotta rewind to where it all began. The rough streets of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where a young Torrance first grabbed that mic and poured out the pain of the struggle. From the jump, Boosie's life was tangled up with the law, and that criminal record turned into a shadow that followed him in ways he never thought possible. The roots of this whole saga were planted back in 2008, when a normal day in the hood flipped into the start of a nightmare that still ain't over. On October 22nd, 2008, Boosie got snatched up by East Baton Rouge deputies after they claimed they found weed and a Glock sitting in his ride. Now, anybody from the streets knows, getting caught with a little weed and a strap ain't exactly headline news. But for Boosie, this wasn't just another charge. This was strike number 3 with marijuana, and that's what flipped everything against him. Suddenly, the system was ready to drag him straight through the mud. 3 years down, that's what the young rapper, who was just heating up the dirty South scene, had to face as he got swallowed by the prison machine that's been crushing black men for generations. On September 22nd, 2009, Boosie pled guilty to that third offense marijuana charge, and the trap slammed shut. By 2011, while still locked up, Boosie's troubles got even heavier. He got hit with fresh drug charges after being accused of trying to sneak contraband into prison. He pled guilty, and just like that, his time stretched into an 8-year sentence. The same star who was shaking up the rap game was now staring at nearly a decade behind bars. But the real storm was still ahead. What turned into one of Louisiana's most infamous murder cases? On June 17th, 2010, Boosie was indicted for the first-degree murder of Terry Boyd, who had been taked out the year before. Prosecutors came out swinging, painting Boosie like a kingpin who had his own hitman on call. They claimed he hired Michael Marlowe Mike Loud to handle dirty work, framing it as a cold-blooded murder for hire over street territory. If that jury believed it, Boosie wasn't just facing time, he was staring straight at the death penalty. And they didn't stop there. Prosecutors tried to brand him as a monster tied to at least 5 other took out, even though they never had the evidence to make those charges stick. The trial turned into pure spectacle. Prosecutors dragged Boosie's rap lyrics into the spotlight, twisting his music into so-called evidence. Tracks like 187 Inches in a Body Bag, recorded around the time of Terry Boyd's death, were picked apart line by line as if they were diary entries or full-on confessions. On June 28, 2010, Boosie stood in a Louisiana courtroom and pled not guilty. His defense squad clapped back hard, saying the state's entire case leaned on the shaky words of Michael Marlowe Mike Loud, testimony so flimsy it could collapse like a trap house in an earthquake. They were so sure of the weakness, they didn't even bother calling a single witness. The defense dropped the mic, resting their case and basically saying the prosecutors had nothing solid to stand on. The tension in that Louisiana courtroom was thick, like smoke in a trap house, as 12 jurors weighed whether one of the South's brightest rap stars would walk free or face death itself. The hip-hop world was on edge, holding its breath, knowing a guilty verdict wouldn't just take out Boosie's career. It could take his life too. Then came May 11th, 2012. The jury came back in less than 10 minutes with a shocking verdict: not guilty. That lightning-fast decision proved what many already believed. The state's case was weaker than watered-down liquor. It was a massive W for Boosie and his camp, but the scars from the trial were already carved deep. The system snatched years of his prime. Even though Boosie beat the murder rap, he was still caged up on those drug charges. Finally, on March 5th, 2014, he walked out after serving about 5 years of an 8-year stretch. His early release likely came from good behavior mixed with some slick legal moves by his lawyers, but the damage was done. Prison had reshaped him forever. The wild young rapper who went in came out a hardened vet, sharper and more aware of how the game truly works. From 2014 to 2018, he was stuck on parole, still chained under the system's thumb with strict rules and heavy monitoring. But instead of letting it break him, Boosie came out hungrier, more determined, and ready to prove he wasn't finished. Boosie jumped back into the rap game like his life was on the line, dropping project after project, rebuilding his name, and carving out a comeback that became part of his legend. But no matter how hard he worked, those old convictions hung on him like a chain he couldn't shake off. Because here's the problem. Once you're stamped a felon, the system never lets you breathe. That 2011 drug conviction meant every firearm charge hit him way harder, since federal law bans felons from even touching a gun, and like a bad rerun, the same script kept playing out. In 2019, Boosie got popped again during a traffic stop in Newnan, Georgia. It started like deja vu, a white Dodge Charger swerving wild, almost clipping another car, and the deputy claiming he smelled that sticky icky. A search of the ride turned up drugs and a loaded strap. But it was what went down on May 6, 2023 in San Diego that flipped Boosie's whole world upside down. That moment sparked the legal storm, now threatening to rip him away from his family and the streets indefinitely. He flew into America's finest city on business, just to film a video and rock a club in the Gaslamp Quarter. What should have been a routine money move turned into his darkest legal nightmare since beating that murder case over a decade earlier. Social media chatter mixed with heavy federal eyes made it worse. And as the sun dropped over San Diego's upscale Choiceview neighborhood, Boosie Badazz's Grind Day suddenly turned into a federal headline the culture couldn't stop talking about. At 42, the Red Stick legend touched down in Southern Cali with big plans. Shoot a video, hit the stage that night at the Phantom Lounge in San Diego's flashy Gaslamp Quarter, and keep the bag moving. But what he didn't know was that the cops were already on him heavy, watching his every step, just waiting for the slightest slip-up. The crazy part? It was pure street irony. Boosie built his whole legacy on keeping it raw and real, never switching up on his fans, and that's exactly what got him caught. Court docs reveal San Diego police were tuned into an Instagram live from a known crip when they spotted a man in the frame with a black strap tucked in his waistband in a backyard. That man, none other than Boosie Badazz himself. In today's social media world, where rappers put their lives on display for the fans, Boosie's natural instinct to keep it real ended up backfiring big time. The same transparency that made the streets love him gave the feds the perfect ammo to build a full-blown case. What made him authentic turned into the very trap that caught him slipping. Authorities didn't play light either. They rolled out serious muscle. With an airborne law enforcement chopper in the sky, they tracked him down to a black SUV, multiple units, helicopter surveillance, and tight coordination. All that force aimed at one rapper who had only come to the city to shoot a video and stack a bag. Boosie was just chasing a bag and showing love to his West Coast fan base when the cops finally made their move. A traffic stop that turned into exactly what they were hunting for. The search came back hot. 2 loaded straps in the whip, a Glock and a Hellcat, with Boosie riding alongside another dude named Billy Johnson. That discovery sparked a chain reaction that flipped the next chapter of Boosie's life upside down. At first glance, the situation looked like something he could handle. The charges on the table were state level: possession of a firearm by a felon, concealed carry in a vehicle, possession of ammo by a prohibited person, and even being listed as the unregistered owner of a registered gun. Boosie's lawyer, Megan Blanco, told him straight. The plan was to take a plea on the state charges, hoping it would land him probation instead of more dead time behind bars. From the street view, the move made sense. Boosie had already learned from past battles that sometimes the sharpest play isn't fighting head-on. It's taking the deal, moving smart with the system, and living to fight another day. His fans were behind him, fully understanding the weight of his situation, and there was real hope this latest legal bump would get smoothed out quick and quiet. But then came the plot twist nobody saw coming. On June 14th, 2023, the state charges got dismissed in San Diego County Superior Court. For a split second, it looked like Boosie had swerved another legal bullet. The relief must have hit hard. Another close call, another escape. But that calm vanished faster than a Newport in a crack house. Just moments after walking out with the win, federal agents swooped in and arrested Boosie right outside the courthouse, this time on a federal charge of being a felon caught with a firearm. All of it traced back to that May 6th bust. But now, the ATF boys had snatched the case, leaning on federal laws that ban convicted felons from ever touching a strap. The twist rocked everybody, and even Boosie's attorneys, Megan Blanco and Damon Achor, called the federal arrest highly unusual, arguing it broke Justice Department policy about not prosecuting the same man twice for the same offense. They even hinted the feds had another motive: Boosie's raw, unfiltered voice. His outspokenness on social media and in his music about the justice system might have been the real reason he ended up in their crosshairs. The emotional toll was written all over Boosie's face. He let it be known this felt like straight harassment. He even poured his heart out on social media, apologizing to his kids with the words, "I want to take this time to apologize to my kids. I am sorry, and I love y'all forever." The thought of facing Fed time while his 9 children had to watch from the sidelines was tearing him apart. Boosie pled not guilty to the federal charges, but was locked down at first. Then on June 20th, 2023, a magistrate judge granted him bail, $50,000, later doubled to $100,000. The terms allowed him to travel for shows, keeping money flowing while chaos swirled. But make no mistake, that federal case never left. It hovered over him like a dark storm cloud for more than a year. Boosie was stuck in legal purgatory, grinding on tour, dropping music, keeping his image alive, but the weight was eating at him. Anyone close could see it. The stress, the uncertainty, the fear of decades in a federal cell hanging over his head like a guillotine. Every part of his life and career was under pressure. Then, out of nowhere, came what felt like divine intervention. On July 12, 2024, U.S. District Judge Kathy Ann Bensavengo tossed out the federal firearm charge, citing a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, United States v. Duarte, which declared that banning nonviolent felons from owning guns violated the Second Amendment. Since Boosie's past charges were only nonviolent drug cases, his legal team pushed hard and won, arguing he shouldn't lose his gun rights under this new precedent. The celebration was instant and raw. Boosie broke down crying outside the courthouse, telling the world, "This situation made me see who was down with me and who wasn't. God had a different plan." He even dropped a victory video floating in the lazy river at San Diego's Siquan Casino Resort, looking free, relaxed, and finally ready to close this chapter.
Now, it was a state case. The feds came, picked it up. They had a ruling in the Supreme Court that went in my favor, and the case got dropped by the judge. The case got...
And Hatch currently lives in Atlanta. Now he faces a maximum of 15 years behind bars. His defense attorney did not disclose any parts of the plea agreement or any details about it, but the judge made it very clear today, regardless of what's in that plea agreement, it is the sentencing judge who will have the final.
I was sentenced to 10 for third offense marijuana.
Yeah.
How you know if I'm drug addict if you never send me to rehab? I was sent straight to the pen. How am I, you know if I'm a drug addict if you... This is the first time I've ever had a judge who I would say is fair, bro. Judges always stuck it to me.
Do you think it's because this judge is in California as opposed to Louisiana? Because you've always had Louisiana judges, right?
For the fans and folks who'd watched him battle the system for decades, it felt like the ending they'd been waiting on, the one Boosie's story always deserved. Here stood a man who had survived the streets, beaten a murder rap, done his time, and finally got vindicated by the courts. The redemption arc looked complete, but the feds weren't letting him ride off into the sunset. The victory lasted less than 2 weeks before prosecutors came storming back even harder. On July 19th, 2024, U.S. Attorney Tara McGrath's office re-indicted Boosie on 2 charges: possession of a firearm by a felon in interstate commerce, and a brand new one, knowingly having a gun while using or addicted to a controlled substance. To make it worse, they aimed to snatch every firearm and bullet tied to the case. If convicted on both, the outcome could have been devastating. Boosie was now staring down the barrel of 25 years in federal prison. The emotional whiplash was brutal. One moment he was celebrating freedom and vindication, and the next he was hit with charges even heavier than before. His response on social media came raw and uncut, pure anger and frustration from a man convinced the system was out to crush him on purpose, trying to erase everything he'd fought to build. The new drug-related charge felt especially grimy. Boosie himself questioned why it hadn't been part of the first indictment, blasting the whole thing as a circus and straight-up prosecutorial overreach. The timing made it sting worse, letting him taste freedom just to snatch it away with even heavier consequences, like they wanted to crush his spirit once and for all. That's when Boosie Badazz realized this battle was bigger than him, bigger than his lawyers, maybe even bigger than his ability to fight back. No matter the appellate rulings or constitutional arguments, the feds made it crystal clear they weren't letting go, and while the courts argued in legal language, the streets knew what it really meant. They were trying to end him. By the summer of 2025, Boosie Badazz was fighting a war on all sides, not just against the feds, but against his pride and the very streets that shaped him. The non-stop legal pressure had chipped away at him like water breaking down stone, draining his spirit, his family, and his pockets. For nearly 3 years straight, he'd been trapped in a case that kept twisting and growing worse. Each time he thought he found a way out, the emotional toll and money loss crushed him harder, and the same man who once swore he'd never fold was facing a brutal truth. Sometimes the realest move ain't to swing harder. It's knowing when to step back from a fight you just can't win. The decision that shifted everything didn't come from his high-powered lawyers or the street advisors whispering in his ear. It came from the people who loved him most. In conversations that had to cut deep, Boosie's family held up the mirror and made him face what his pride was blocking out. Sometimes the most gangster move ain't proving you'll never fold. It's protecting what truly matters, putting family first and living to fight another day. On August 4th, 2025, Boosie shook the culture when he announced on X that he had accepted a plea deal in the federal gun case. The news hit like an earthquake in hip-hop and left fans stunned. This was the same man who'd battled the system for decades, who'd beaten a murder charge against impossible odds, who had always shouted his innocence and his right to bear arms. Now it looked like he was throwing in the towel, but those who really knew him understood. This wasn't surrender. It was survival. A calculated move, guided by the wisdom of his mother, proving that sometimes the toughest choice is the smartest one. On August 26, 2025, Boosie stood before a federal judge in San Diego and formally pleaded guilty to one count of being a felon in possession of a firearm. The courtroom was thick with emotion. His fiancée and family sat close, standing by him through what might be one of the hardest moments of his entire life. And when he stepped outside those courthouse doors, the weight of that decision showed in every word he spoke to reporters, like a man carrying the world on his shoulders. When reporters pressed Boosie on what he needed most from his supporters, his answer was stripped down and vulnerable. No bravado, just honesty. The charge itself carried a max penalty of 15 years behind bars, but the plea deal shifted the stakes. Federal prosecutors agreed to drop the second firearm charge tied to drug use and instead pushed for a 2-year sentence. The deal also came with a recommendation for 3 years of supervised release after prison, and prosecutors even promised not to chase extra financial penalties. Acknowledging Boosie's limited paper at this point in the fight, the plea agreement laid bare the detail that pulled the feds into play: the interstate twist. Prosecutors revealed Boosie had bought the Glock and Hellcat handguns in Georgia, then carried them across state lines on a Delta flight to San Diego the very same day he was arrested. That one move checked the box for interstate commerce, turning what could have been a state case into a full-blown federal battle. But beyond all the legal jargon and courtroom deals, the real cost of this saga can't be measured in years or dollars. It's a toll carved deep into a man's life. Boosie's lawyer, Megan Blanco, stressed the heavy personal toll, but kept a tone of cautious optimism about what comes next at sentencing. She pointed to his community work and charitable efforts, telling reporters, "I am optimistic for Mr. Hatch." He wanted nothing more than to accept responsibility and put this behind him. And now it's my job to make sure the court understands the scope of the case and what it's really about. But the timing of this sentencing casts a shadow, adding yet another layer of tragedy to Boosie's long, painful story. Boosie's sentencing is locked in for November 21st, 2025, just days after his birthday. Instead of celebrating another year of life, the 43-year-old father of 9 will be standing in front of a federal judge, staring at the possibility of losing his prime years to prison walls. Yet even with the weight of it all, Boosie kept grinding, still performing, still moving, while out on his $100,000 bond. He's broken down the federal court timeline for his fans, keeping them in the loop every step of the way. That kind of resilience, that's the mark of a real street soldier. Even with years in the pen hanging over his head, Boosie never slowed up, keeping his performance schedule alive and pushing his music like nothing could stop him. His album Words of a Real One dropped on August 1st, 2025, just days before his guilty plea, proving his dedication to the craft even in his darkest chapter. But not everybody in hip-hop showed him love during this storm. The loudest hater, Charleston White, a controversial figure who used Boosie's legal mess as his personal stage for clout chasing and non-stop disrespect. White even mocked Boosie's claim of being one of the greatest rappers of all time, throwing shade just to stir the pot. Charleston White's commentary got so cruel, it even shocked folks used to his wild antics. He went as far as publicly saying he hoped Boosie would lost his life in jail, crossing a line that showed just how deep this personal beef had gotten between the two. But for every voice dripping with hate, there were countless more pouring love and respect on Boosie's name. Many in the hip-hop community praised his choice to take the plea as a smart, grown man move, one that put his family and long-term survival above ego, pride, and street politics. In recent interviews, Boosie's tone carried a calm acceptance, like a man at peace with his choice, even though the future still hangs in the balance. Now, with November 21st, 2025 creeping closer, the entire hip-hop world is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens to one of the culture's most raw and resilient voices. U.S. District Judge Kathy Bensavengo will have the final word. Will Boosie get the recommended 2 years, or will the hammer drop with something closer to the 15-year max? There's a flicker of hope in Boosie's voice when he speaks about Judge Bensavengo, like he truly believes this might be the fair shake he's been chasing his whole legal life. Whether November 21st, 2025 marks the end of Boosie Badazz's run in the streets or simply another wild chapter in his never-ending survival saga, only time will tell. But one thing is undeniable. His journey from the Baton Rouge projects to the federal courtrooms of San Diego stands as one of the most gripping stories hip-hop has ever seen. A story built on raw talent, real street cred, tragedy, and the unshakable will to survive even when the odds are stacked sky high against you. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you subscribe to the Gossip Channel, smash that like below, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Then click one of the cards on your screen for more.